when the like Nazis, I mean, they're not all right, when Nazis marched in Charlottesville, like I remember I would call her when I was in college, like pretty much every day. And so I called her that day and I was just like, I mean, I'm just kind of shook right now. You know, this is like a very upsetting thing that just happened. I mean, I'm scared, honestly. You know, I'm living in the South, like I'm living in Arkansas, and like I'm privileged enough to have like pretty light skin, but like not all of my family does, you know, and it doesn't really matter how light your skin is. If they find out that you're like, you know, that you are Black, then like they hate you. So it was just pretty like nerve wracking, you know, and pretty uncomfortable. And I was super upset, you know, and like kind of started like crying on the phone with her, like not like weeping, but just like not okay, you know. And she just got like radio silent, just so silent. And I was like, what's up? You know, I know that if you're not saying anything, then like you don't want to say something because you think you're going to offend me. And she was basically just like, well, there's wrong on both sides.
This is the Q Dropped podcast. Stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Back in the 80s, when I was just a kid, my parents used to take us on endless road trips. They'd pile my brother, our dogs, and me into our golden Westphalia and head south down the I-5. We'd sit in traffic in Seattle in a downpour and play the license plate game. That's where we were tasked with spotting as many different state and province license plates as we could. My dad would inevitably cheat, not because he's dishonest, but because we would accuse him and he would deny it with a smirk, and eventually we would all just end up laughing. When we hit Oregon, the debate would begin. Should we continue down the I-5 or hit the Pacific Coast Highway? The I-5 was much faster, but kind of dull for the most part. The Pacific Coast Highway, on the other hand, was long and windy, but the views were enough to stop your breathing for a moment. We'd slow crawl through Big Sur, and the visuals in Kerouac's books would come to life, the wild Pacific slamming up against America, slowly chiseling away at the landscape. If we took the I-5, we'd always stay a night in Redding in some seedy Motel 6, where my brother and I would play hours of Marco Polo in the pool as the sun set on California. The next day, we'd rise to make our way to our final destination, which might have been Anaheim so we could go to Disneyland, or maybe San Diego and camping on the beach in Carlsbad. Either way, my dad's predictable campaign to stop for Anderson's split pea soup in Bakersfield would begin. This was, according to him, the best split pea soup in the entire world, and was simply to die for. Sadly, we didn't stop there often because my mom struggled with generational trauma from the Great Depression and pinched every damn penny she could get her hands on. But we had to spend hours listening to my dad talk up this miraculous soup in Bakersfield, California, where we rarely visited. When I sat down to interview today's guest, Jane, and she told me that she grew up in Bakersfield, the first thing that popped into my head was that split pea soup my dad would never shut up about. Oh, isn't that where the pea soup is?
Yeah. The pea soup, Anderson's pea soup, or Anderson whatever pea soup. I never had it, but there is like a big billboard that's about the pea soup.
Jane spent her early life in Bakersfield.
It's like a lot of farmland and a lot of oil, and it tends in a lot of like religious people, and a lot of people settled there from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. So you have this like Southern religious conservatism that's been there for probably like the last 100 years now, and it's just like manifested, and they think that they're really oppressed because they're living in California, but they're very conservative. So they like everybody in Bakersfield is like, I hate California, I hate California, I hate California because it's so progressive. And like they were a big part of the like, let's get Gavin Newsom out of office and let's like waste California's money with the second re-election. Like a lot of that was happening in Bakersfield.
Despite the fact that California as a whole is a blue state, Bakersfield and the surrounding area has always been quite red.
Kevin McCarthy is our representative, and I don't know if you know about like American politics like that, but he is like GOP evil leader number one. So he's like the House representative, and he has been the House representative for my city for as long as I can remember. And he's super, super, super conservative and super like Trump was great and has very much been pushing forward and like a big ringleader for pushing forward that agenda, like for the last at least 10 years.
Jane comes from a tight-knit family, and she's always enjoyed the company of her mother.
My mom and I, like, you know, have been pretty close for a while. I mean, for pretty much like all of our lives, we were really close. You know, we would like hang out and watch Say Yes to the Dress like all the time was kind of a thing that we would do. And we would watch Say Yes to the Dress for like hours. So that was always super fun. That was super fun. And we had like farm animals growing up. So like just like raising goats and pigs and stuff like that was always like a really fun time as well. I mean, she was our like really fun parent and our happy parent to be around. She really is like a really good mom. You know, I mean, she made us lunches every day that like, you know, there was food in the house to do it. And she would like draw on our paper bags, like on our brown paper bags, and like it'd be themed. So if it was like the spring, then she would draw like butterflies and stuff on it. And if it was winter, it was always like a snowman and stuff. And if it was our birthday, then she would like draw balloons on them and stuff. And I cooked with her a lot and baked with her a lot. And like my cooking skills definitely came from her. I like built upon that for sure.
At times, Jane would even describe her relationship with her mom as a close friendship.
Her and I were pretty close. She married my stepdad when I was a baby, so like he raised me and stuff. They had kind of a treacherous relationship, so like she kind of relied on me a lot for a lot of things, and I was her best friend for like a long time because she just kind of didn't have a lot of other friends.
Before her mother divorced her stepdad, Jane was one of 5 kids in the house. She has 2 brothers and 2 sisters who are technically stepsisters, but who Jane sees as siblings just like her brothers. Jane's biological father was Black, and her mother is white.
I'm half Black, and like all of her kids are half Black.
One of the things that Jane recalls from her childhood is how deeply religious her mom was.
She always like took us to church though. Like that was her thing, was like, we're going to make sure that we're like going to church. Like she didn't want to be like the spiritual lead of the house because she felt like that was the man's role. But like, if she wasn't dragging us every week, then like we weren't going to go, you know? So it was a charismatic church. So like a Pentecostal church. So like all the like faith healing and all of that kind of stuff was like very like present. You know, we would have these like revivals where we were there for like a week long and just going all day long if you could, you know, and if you can't, then you're there like right after church and you're there until midnight. And then you get up, go to school, and then you're there again at like 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. And then you're there again until midnight on those like revival weeks or whatever. So it was a big part of growing up was like Sunday we're there for church, like all the way from the first service through the second service is worship. And then we might come back for Sunday night service, but we're definitely coming on Wednesday night as well.
I was raised without religion, so it was only pretty recently that I first heard the term charismatic Christianity. I've since learned that this is a form of Christianity that found its beginnings in California. The faith is distinguished by beliefs and practices that center around miracles like healing and speaking in tongues. It is, from an outward perspective, a more extreme version of the Christianity that we all know. We've heard from a lot of people whose cues are evangelical Christians, but it seems as though it should also be a natural progression from charismatic Christianity to conspiratorial thinking as well. From what Jane tells me, her church took this precise path.
That pastor now is like very out there, you know, like just, I mean, out there with some of his stuff. Like him and the pastor's wife like changed their profile pictures to Donald Trump the day that he got elected, you know, and we're like, God's back in the White House, you know, so
Religion was Jane's entire world as a child. And as if the amount of time she spent in church wasn't enough, her parents also sent her to a religious school.
I also went to a Christian school for most of my life too. My mom was a Christian school teacher, so we got to go to the school for free.
Since Jane was a student, her school has also taken a clear political stance.
That school is also very Trump, now, so.
It should come as no surprise that the education Jane received at the school was questionable.
The school that I went to, we had to do these evolution isn't real papers and stuff. And it was kind of my biology teacher in high school, wouldn't mention the word evolution because she thought it was evil, which is just so you're the biology teacher and you won't even say the word because you think it's evil. It's just an evil word. It was pretty wild, looking back on it.
Jane's mother would echo these same sentiments at home.
She never believed in evolution, and she has always believed in the Illuminati and weird shit like that.
Although Jane's mom had brought her up in a science-denying, highly religious atmosphere, she did follow the science in a few areas.
We were all very vaccinated when we were kids, I got that flu shot every year, and I hate needles, and just all very vaccinated when we were kids.
Her mother had also planted the seeds of critical thought that would grow and eventually free Jane from her indoctrination.
She was such a big influence on you need to be checking your sources and you need to be fact checking and you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. When I was growing up doing research papers and stuff, she was a big help with those.
This was all the foundation she needed to be open to understanding the world in a new way. I
grew up in a very brainwashed environment. So by the time that I was in college, one block fell and just all of them crumbled around me, I had a professor that was basically you can be a Christian and believe in evolution at the same time. And that was what? I'd never heard a Christian authority, let alone science professor, be yeah, you can be a Christian and also believe in evolution. And anybody who tells you differently is lying and not right, And that was really the first oh shit, that can happen? Really? Well, what else isn't true, And just kind of everything else crumbled away.
Today, Jane's faith looks very, very different.
I still believe in God and believe in Christ and stuff. I also, I don't know. I don't really feel it's my place to be your religion's wrong. And that was not the way that we were raised.
Jane is a progressive Christian with clear left-leaning values. She supports the LGBTQ+ community. She spoke to me about her support for workers' rights, and she was horrified at the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Jane is nearly in polar opposition to the community she grew up in, and that was enough to cause a few clashes, especially with her mom. When we come back, Jane's mom goes down the rabbit hole. We want to take this opportunity to thank our patrons. Without you, we couldn't make the show. You make it possible, so thank you. If you want to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/qdropped. The link is also in the show notes. And choose your tier. They start at just $3 per month, and patrons get access to plenty of extra clips from each episode, including some raw video clips of the interview itself. It's a great way to be able to put a face to a name. Thank you so much, patrons, and now back to this week's episode. As Jane got older, the internet became a more common household utility. During her high school years, YouTube was taking the world by storm. People everywhere were taken in by this new platform that allowed anyone to broadcast content across the globe. Jane's mother would eventually begin to wade through the sea of YouTube videos that were uploaded each day and quickly found herself consuming questionable content that would color the rest of Jane's life.
I mean, geez, by the time that like we were leaving high school, like my younger brother and I were just kind of like, okay, the Illuminati is not real and you need to chill and like stop getting on YouTube and watching these insane videos. And then, you know how YouTube is like you find a video and then you find another video and you just keep going with it.
After graduation, Jane would no longer be around to watch her mom continue down this path.
I went to Arkansas for college and I met my husband there. It's pretty funny because I think I found like the most progressive human like in the sticks of Arkansas.
Jane's mother was proud of her daughter.
She was like supportive of me going to school, which is like pretty cool.
Jane moved back to California for a few years after school and then found herself settling in a big city in another state with her husband. At first, her mother didn't like him at all.
Because she was like sure that he was manipulating me and like just lying to me and, you know, not the person that he said that he was. She'll get an idea in her head and just freaking rock with it.
It took about a year, but eventually her mother began to accept Jane's new husband into the fold. Even though her mom had already begun to explore the world of conspiracy theories, things started to become more serious in the year leading up to the 2016 election.
So yeah, like 2015 rolled around. I knew that she was going to vote Republican because she always does, because Bakersfield has it convinced in your head. And like, I mean, American conservatism has it convinced in their head that like, if you're American, if you're proud to be an American, if you're a God-fearing American, then you are also a Republican. And when she found out I was voting Democrat, like, you know, I mean, it was pretty wild for her. And
Jane found herself wondering how her mother could justify supporting a man like Donald Trump.
It was pretty frustrating to see just how easily she accepted Donald Trump. As like a person, just, I mean, the things that he would say are just pretty foul, and they don't reflect Christ. They don't reflect like God and the caring community that we're supposed to have and the loving community that we are supposed to have.
But like most of the Christian right, it appears Jane's mother was successful in compartmentalizing her values and refusing to acknowledge the fact that twice-divorced adulterer Donald Trump, an ultra-capitalist, exploitative, misogynist, racist, and ableist, is among the furthest people from Christ on earth. She saw what she wanted to see.
She like very much was on board with, again, like God has ordained Donald Trump. Everything's great because of that.
Unfortunately, too many of us have experienced this. Watching our loved ones cherry pick the reality they live in, suffering from cognitive dissonance and compromising values we knew they once swore by. But one thing that is unique about Jane's story is that her mother is white, while Jane is half Black. And when you're half Black and your white mom starts to fall into the MAGA cult, the unthinkable begins to happen.
When Black Lives Matter like started to make its way to the surface around like 2014, that would get kind of frustrating with her sometimes because like conservative Republicans are super against it. And I don't know, like she like to this day, she says that like Black people are important and Black people matter, but she refuses to like use the term Black Lives Matter because it's a terrorist organization and it's Antifa and Antifa is more dangerous than the Nazi Party according to her, and which I mean that's wild, but sure.
Jane's mother would begin to send her half-Black kids conspiracy videos about Black victims of police brutality and Black Lives Matter.
She wasn't like, you know, publicly like this stuff is wrong, but silently she was sending her Black kids videos about like, actually this is wrong and actually they're rioting and actually this and actually that. And that got really offensive at one point and like pretty frustrating because like I don't, and like at one point, like we all kind of had to be like, we don't know how to tell you this, but like all of your kids are half black. So like you have to stop doing this. You need to stop sending me this nonsense because it's actually getting like deeply offensive at this point. And like some of the stuff that you're sending is borderline racist.
Jane and her siblings began to feel less important than their mother's new worldview.
Whatever the Republican propaganda is spewing out and whatever like crazy old conservative propaganda is spewing out, then like that's what she's going to believe, even if it's over her own kids who are black.
Understand that this is completely uncharacteristic for Jane's mom. There was a time when she stood up to racists and willingly suffered losses because of it. She was a good and protective mother to her children, whom she loves dearly. But something about QAnon just makes you forget who you are. It erases your values and completely removes yourself from your body, replacing it with something that no one recognizes.
And that was another thing that was kind of frustrating because she like went against her family to date black people, you know, like her family was like super against it and she went against them and like lost some of her family members because of it in the 80s. So now, you know, 40 years later, you're not supporting the same community that you were willing to lose family members over at the time. When the like Nazis, I mean, they're not all right. When Nazis marched in Charlottesville, like I remember I would call her when I was in college, like pretty much every day. And so I called her that day and I was just like, I mean, I'm just kind of shook right now. You know, this is like a very upsetting thing that just happened. And I like really don't know how to feel or, I mean, I'm scared, honestly. You know, I'm living in the South, like I'm living in Arkansas and like I'm privileged enough to have like pretty light skin, but like not all of my family does, you know, and it doesn't really matter how light your skin is. If they find out that you're like, you know, that you are black, then like they hate you. So it was just pretty like nerve wracking, you know, and pretty uncomfortable. And knowing that there were people that were subtle in their racism, but that were racist that I was even like working with, and that racist people had felt so emboldened to be out marching in the street. I was super upset, you know, and like kind of started like crying on the phone with her, like not like weeping, but just like not okay, you know, and she just got like radio silent, just so silent. And I was like, what's up? You know, I know that if you're not saying anything, then like you don't want to say something because you think you're going to offend me. And she was basically just like, well, there's wrong on both sides here. And that's like all that she could say to me about it. And that was pretty upsetting, you know, and that was kind of like, that was probably one of the first moments that I was like, oh, she's actually not here anymore.
I know what it's like to lose your parents, to whom you're very close, down this rabbit hole. I know what it's like to look at these people who are once your literal heroes and not even recognize them anymore. I understand the heartbreak and grief and deep sense of loss. What I cannot and will never be able to fully understand is what it feels like to be on the receiving end of racism. All I can tell you is that as I sat on the video call with Jane and she told me the story about experiencing racism from her white mother, who had once been her best friend, my heart broke. I can't even begin to imagine how much more difficult this would make dealing with your QAnon loved one. This is injustice in your own home, in your own family, committed by a loved one. And it's just like Brendan's story from episode 6 all over again. There aren't many things that can make a mother look at their beloved child and say such hateful things, but QAnon is one of them. We could end the episode right there, and it would still be an eye-opening gut punch about QAnon loved ones. But Jane's mother's descent into Q was just beginning. Soon after the pandemic hit, and at first, Jane's mom was taking it very seriously.
And when COVID was happening, like we had just gone to the grocery store, like maybe 2 or 3 days before the whole, like, it's lockdown time, go get all the toilet paper, everything is like coming off the shelves, you know? So we were kind of like, oh, you know, we're good. We got like 2 weeks worth of food. Like we happened to go to the grocery store literally like the day before all this happened. And she was like, no, no, you need 2 months worth of food. And I was like, for what? And she was just like, they're not going to have any food for us. And I was like, I really doubt that the government is going to just let us starve to death, that that's how we all die, is like starving to death in our homes. And also like capitalism isn't going to let that happen. The grocery store isn't going to close, you know? And she was like, okay, you'll see. I never saw any of it because it never happened. And she was even like making masks for people and sending them to like, you know, hospitals and this and that, and like really kind of on board with it. And then within a matter of 2 months, masks are actually really bad, and they increase your CO2 levels, and it kills you if you wear a mask for more than like 10 minutes. We were in a restaurant. I overheard her talking with a manager that was basically like, oh, you don't have to wear a mask if you don't want to in here. And like my husband and I were both like, no, we're good. You know, we're going to go ahead and keep them on. And my mom was like, it just makes her feel safe. And I was like, that's not true. And like called her out on it. I was just like, no, like, what do you mean it just makes me feel safe? Like it's some type of like blankie for me to be holding on to right now while I'm facing this worldwide pandemic. Like, no, you know?
Masks continue to be one of the best tools we have in the fight against the spread of COVID. Despite Jane's mother's insistence, they do not cause toxic levels of CO2. If they did, doctors and nurses would have a lower life expectancy than anyone else, and they don't. Drywall installers would be dropping like flies, and painters would be keeling over at an astronomical rate. Sadly, untrained and uneducated people are spreading content on the internet that seems to show that CO2 levels in a mask are toxic. Often, they'll place a CO2 meter inside of their mask to read the levels, and yes, it will indicate extremely high levels of CO2. But here's the thing, that meter will give you the exact same high-level CO2 reading if you're holding it near your mouth without a mask. It's high because you exhale carbon dioxide. If you blow on any carbon dioxide meter, it will show high levels of CO2 because that's what comes out of your mouth when you exhale. What these meters are not proving is that this gas is being trapped in your mask, because it's not. We've all heard about people dying by their own hand in a garage with a running car. That is what happens when you're overcome with CO2. If masks trapped the gas to toxic levels, you would see people who wear masks in their professions literally dropping to their deaths everywhere constantly. Surgeons would not be able to endure 4-hour surgeries, let alone 10 minutes. Masks do not trap your CO2. And I find it hilarious that these anti-masker Q-nuts are suggesting that they do, while simultaneously proposing that a mask cannot keep out the virus, because that's a whole other Q talking point that contradicts the CO2 theory. But listen, you're listening to the Q Dropped podcast, okay? And that means that under no circumstances should you ever take my word for a damned thing. I have left resources and fact checks in the show notes so you can assess the evidence yourself. As for Jane, she's been happily wearing a mask in public spaces and has, so far, not dropped dead from the carbon dioxide poisoning that her mother promised will happen. But you know that all good QAnoners move the goalposts when their predictions don't come true, or they just forget they ever made them and move on to the next theory, and that's exactly what Jane's mom did.
God help us when the vaccine talk started coming out. That was... Man, oh man. That one was a really rough time. You know, I knew that she wasn't going to get vaccinated because over the past like 4 or 5 years, whenever like vaccine stuff would get brought up, even before COVID, or so I guess 4 or 5 years before COVID, she started like kind of being like, oh, well, you know, there are signs that vaccines are linked to autism. And I was just like, that's not true. Like immediately, like that's not true. Like once the vaccine talk even started to roll out, she was just like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's the sign of the beast of the end times. And they're going to put chips in us. And that's the devil working his way into our bodies. And then it's going to be the sign of the beast, like straight up.
Jane decided it would be in her best interest and the best interest of her relationship with her mom to get vaccinated without her mother's knowledge.
I'm just going to like sit here and get my vaccine and not really say anything about it. I did get vaccinated like the second I could. She found out I got vaccinated and got pissed, like so upset about it, because she has it really convinced in her head that like it's a tracking system.
Jane's mom has believed the vaccine to be several different things since they began rolling out. We already know that she believed it was part of an elaborate tracking system, as well as the mark of the beast. These are theories we've all heard before, but this next theory is absolutely new to me.
Then when I got it, it was a way to sterilize people. So she believed, and maybe still does, that I am now sterilized.
And as if that's not enough, she developed another theory on top of that.
So when my older brother got vaccinated, it was actually HIV at that time that they were injecting into people, because it's been a few months now, so a new theory has come up. So she was like, I don't know if I can hug you because now you have HIV, which is also really, really stupid, because you can definitely hug people with HIV, which she knows because she has told me that in my lifetime, like that there's only certain ways that you can get this and hugging it isn't one of them. But so my brother like called me and was like, I was like, what did she do? I already know, like, what did mom do, you know? And he was like, how do you already know? And I was just like, because you're calling me like this, and I already know she's doing something stupid and wild and insane. So tell me it. And he was like, well, she thinks I have HIV now because I got vaccinated. And she, like, just told me that. And I was like, it just got me pretty mad, because her and I had like almost a week-long fight over, like, how she reacted to me getting vaccinated. And she like ended up apologizing and was like, the things I said were really harsh and crass. And, you know, I shouldn't have reacted in such a like hard way. She didn't say like crazy way, but just such a like harsh way, you know? But then she went right around and did it again, like a few months later, you know? Her and I had like a really big fight when I got vaccinated. Like it was huge, and it was pretty nasty, honestly, because just the stuff that she said was just like ridiculous and wild and hurtful. And like, I mean, saying that I'm sterilized, like that's pretty hurtful, you know? And then like, I'm not sure if I really want kids. And so she was just kind of like, well, you don't want kids anyway, so I guess it's fine. And I was just like, where are you coming from with this? Like, what is this hostility that like you are approaching me with this, you know?
Jane told me that she can't help but wonder what the next COVID vaccine theory will be. What could the conspiracy theorists possibly come up with that hasn't already been proposed?
I haven't grown my third eyeball yet, but that's cool.
Sadly, though unsurprisingly, Jane's mom has had COVID.
She's got COVID twice now. It was like before the vaccine came out that she got sick with COVID. Got it super bad and like refused to go to the hospital. My brother bought her like an oxygen, like an at-home like oxygen reader. I don't know about it, but apparently it worked. And her like levels got extremely low, like terrifyingly low actually. And she was recovering from COVID probably for like 5 months after that. Like, yeah, like trying to like walk to the mailbox, which was just across the street from her, was like a huge feat when she was able to do it. That was like a month after she had gotten sick, 2 months after she had gotten sick. She didn't go back to work for like 3 months. It was really bad. Like her doctors are like, you have permanent scar tissue damage on your lungs. And like she didn't get vaccinated still, and she caught it again, like maybe 6 months, 7 months later, after she was like fully back and fully feeling good again. And she had a lot of like long-term side effects that came from it. Again, like the scar tissue. I mean, her hair was like falling out for a while. She couldn't catch a breath, like just could not catch a breath for months. So constantly tired, was like sleeping for hours a day. And that wasn't enough for her to feel like she needed to get vaccinated at all. And then at one point, she wasn't even willing to take a COVID test when the government was like sending out tests to everybody. Like she was like, I'm not sticking anything up my nose because they're going to give me the vaccine through my nose. you're not wearing a mask, you're not quarantining, and you're also not willing to even take a test to find out if you have it anymore. Like, what are you doing? You know, like, what are you doing out here?
When we come back, Jane tells us more wild theories her mom has tried to convince her of in recent years.
The Q Drop podcast is produced by Porthos Media, a Canadian independent audio, video, and written content company. If you're in need of audio or video production, editing, or copywriting, visit www.porthosmedia.net. The Q Drop podcast theme song, Mother of Alice, is written, performed, and produced by Porthos Media, so get in touch if you need original music for your upcoming project.
Jane says her mom spends countless hours online going down the rabbit hole, which she finds a little bit hypocritical.
The age group that like told us not to be online all the time, and now that's like all that they do. She didn't trust Wikipedia when I was in high school, but now she'll send me this like random person's video that they're quote unquote from the military or something, and now it's fact, you know, like it's Bible, it's God's word in itself. And that's just kind of wild to me. I don't know, like the further that she's just gotten into this, it's like the more ridiculous she'll be willing to believe.
Like clockwork, really. Jane tells me something so familiar.
She's into the wellness industry too. She's always trying to get me to like take some essential oil.
Of course, we covered essential oils in episode 1, so we hope you already know that these are not the cure-all they're touted to be in online wellness communities. I'll link information in the show notes so you can make educated decisions about your use of essential oils. Like many of us with QAnon loved ones, our hopes that their madness would calm down after Trump lost the 2020 election were dashed by even more moving goalposts, and for some, like Jane's mom, anger.
Like he was like calling me and being like she's screaming and like slamming the door and getting like super upset right now. And then he like went in and like talked with her about it, and it only made her more upset. And like she was sure that the election was being stolen. Obviously, you know, that's the only reason why Donald Trump could lose.
Since the election, it seems Jane's mother has only fallen deeper into the rabbit hole.
Like she thought that the fires in California was some like figure. I don't know who it was. I don't know who it could have been because she didn't explain it to me. But I was like, oh yeah, climate change one time with her. And she was just like, no, it's not that. It's actually a war crime that's happening. It's an act of war. And I was like, from who? And she couldn't tell me, but it was an act of war. So she thinks that like this big group of people, certain elite families are controlling the world, and that God is going to like handle them and take them down. And that we are witnessing the end of I guess Satan in the world. I don't know.
Jane says the theories just never seem to end.
Oh yeah, that's her new thing. Is like it's like a branch off the Illuminati, I think is what it is. But like there's an evil group of people. We don't know who they are. They is who she always refers to them as. They. And then she refers to like, I guess the other people who are on board with her like crazy shit is like we. And like my brother was talking to me, my younger brother was like, who is we? Like, who is she talking about? And I was like, I have no idea. It's we and they, like always these very vague figures that are controlling the world. They've been controlling the world for a really long time. Like not just America, not just like our daily lives, but like literally the world.
Like Catherine in our 3rd episode, Jane doesn't think her mom knows what QAnon is.
At least I don't think she does, because I haven't brought it up to her in a long time. My older brother and I were both kind of like, you know, get off of Facebook. Holy shit, get off of Facebook is like the first one that you need to do. And second, you need to stop listening to QAnon stuff. And she was like, what is QAnon? I don't even know what you guys are talking about. What is QAnon? But like, I've done it to where I'll click on a insane thing that she shares, which I'm like not on Facebook anymore really, because I just can't, like, I can't, you know, it's just, it got like really racist and like really crazy. So I was like, I can't be on here anymore. But every once in a while I'll get on there. I'll see that she shared something insane. I'll click on it, and like the person that shared it from a page, like 3 shares before it was like a page of a profile with a Q, you know? So like she knows what QAnon is, but she like doesn't at the same time. And I don't really want to bring it up to her anymore, because I don't want her to like look into it too much more and find another community that already is her community, but like find even more of her community.
What do you think is in it for her? Like, what do you think she's getting out of it?
God, like it's God. It's God's will. It's God's way. It's what the Lord wants. It's the end times. It's God. Like it really is, you know, like it's just, that's the biggest thing for her is like, well, this is what God wants. And this is what God is saying. And the evils of the world are all going to be taken down by what is righteous and what is good and what is just. And that is God. I know that she really thinks that she's doing right by the Lord in thinking this way. And like, unfortunately, the like people around her are kind of in like of her age group, of the community that is Bakersfield, and all of it. It's just convincing her that she's right, you know? And she just always wanted to do right by God. Like that's why she stayed in that marriage for 20 years, because she was like, he's my husband and divorce is of Satan, so I can't do that and whatever else, you know? So all of her life, she's just been trying to like do right by the Lord. But it's really wild, because now the stuff that she's like heavily in, is like so not of what Christ and God, from my understanding, is supposed to be.
Today, Jane's relationship with her mother is strained, but it still exists, in no small part due to Jane's incredible ability to forgive.
I tend to just kind of keep it like pretty light at this point, you know, like cat videos, dog videos. That's kind of like the most thing that we'll do, you know, like nature stuff and zoo videos, but nothing like ever anything like too crazy intense, you know. Luckily, like, you know, her and I still get along well enough, and like I still like seeing her, you know. I don't live in the same town anymore, which I think is a little helpful. Kind of the like distance makes the heart grow fonder, and when we do get to see each other, it's just like very good, and we just want to make it good, you know. And that's all that we're focused on doing. It's just like having a nice time and like relaxing and enjoying each other's company.
Jane's mom currently lives with Jane's older brother.
He's an atheist. He is pretty outspoken, and that's the thing, is like she's also kind of outspoken about this stuff, and he is also pretty outspoken about this stuff. So it can sometimes cause clashes, but I've talked with him about it, and like he's like, we just talk very light stuff. Like we can't even semi-remotely get into anything. So in order to like keep a relationship with like kind of our only parent, you know, we just choose not to talk about most things.
She's completely given up on changing her mom's mind or pulling her out of QAnon.
I don't know what to do to get her to stop thinking these things. The only thing that I could think to do is to like remove all internet access for her, but that's not going to happen. So at this point, like my brothers and I have all kind of, because she has 3 kids, so she has my 2 brothers and me. So at this point, like we've all just kind of come to the conclusion that like she is not even far right, she's far out, and there's no turning back. I don't think. I don't see her turning back anytime soon or ever, honestly. Like it's just not going to happen. So we just kind of like don't talk about most things. Like most things we don't talk about anymore. So now just kind of like letting it roll off of your back and just being kind of like, oh yeah, it's the new crazy thing that you're on today, you know?
I asked Jane if there was a line her mother might cross that would end their relationship altogether.
I guess I don't want to like draw a line, because I don't want to say like, if she ever does this, I'm like, I'm done, you know? Because I try to be like empathetic and understanding that it's not her. Like, it's this propaganda that has targeted these people and that are going in on it and like really, I mean, disrespecting people who like have faith, you know, and just manipulating people. So I don't want to like put this all on her and even on these people that are just like sheep for this, like this entire thing that is just propaganda and this entire thing that is just like fear mongering. I do like want to emphasize that like the blame is on them and it's not on these people who are like dealing with it, but we are just having to deal with them on a daily basis of the nonsense. I want to have a good relationship with her for as long as I have her, because I understand that like my mom is getting older. She was like 30 something when she had me. So I don't have just a ton of time with her, and knowing that the possibility of her like not being here even in like 20 years, you know, is just keeping me wanting to keep this relationship with her, because like, I mean, she's like the parent that I have, you know, I don't have any other parents. I don't want to like leave her and just kind of leave her out there for these wolves to just completely take her.
Jane copes with the grief of losing the version of her mom she felt close to by leaning on her support system.
My brothers and I talk to each other about it. That is super helpful. My husband's really great.
Even her devout in-laws provide support.
My mother-in-law is like very religious, and like women can't pray to lead the church and stuff like that. You know, like they can't lead everybody in prayer that's against God or whatever. But they were like actively like, we need to get vaccinated, and like reached out to me during like the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff. And we're just kind of like, hope you're doing okay. You know, going and reading other people's things about it is also pretty helpful, because just knowing that like it's not just my mom going insane with some of this stuff. But yeah, just like talking with my brothers and basically coming to the conclusion that like this is what it is, and we just kind of need to make the best out of it, because we can either completely shut it out or we just can keep some semblance of a relationship. And luckily, like right now, our relationship is pretty good, you know? So
Jane's advice for people who also have a QAnon believer in their lives is clear.
Mostly just ignoring most of her messages that are wild is really helpful. Not following her online is also really helpful. And deleting pretty much anybody in your life in every way, shape, and form that is not important to you, that is not basically your parent and thinks this way. Like, I don't associate with anybody that I grew up with that were like adults, you know, that I grew up with, and whatever, that I don't, you know. And I know I've offended like a good handful of people, and they've like straight up told me like, you really hurt me by blocking me, but you really hurt me by posting your racist things, and you really hurt me by posting your absolutely wild things. And, you know, and it was harming my mental health to see this every day, knowing that so many people are thinking these wild things, you know. Why keep it around? You know, why keep it around? Like, you're not going to change their mind. Your Facebook post and your status and all that stuff is not going to change their mind. So just get rid of it. Like, that's all that you can do at this point. And if people get offended, then tell them that you were offended. Like, okay, you also offended me. All that it's doing is making you look like a jackass, because you're sitting here and like furiously typing and like trying your best to like convince these people. And it makes them look like an asshole as well, like sitting here. And now we have like 30 comments and no one has proved a point, and we're all just pissed. So like, I just block them. Like, don't even delete them, block them, so you can't even see them. Like, it's gone forever, you know. Understand that these people are also very lost, and that they're just terrified, like, of whatever it is. They're just terrified, you know? So they are doing what they truly do think is right. Unfortunately, it's not, but they are just terrified people, and they don't even know what they're afraid of, but they're just terrified.
Jane says QAnon does not bode well for our collective future.
I'm just like worried about another storming of the Capitol, because that was honestly pretty intense. I'm worried about Roe v. Wade and how that got overturned, and like nobody thinking that it was going to, and then it did. Just worried about like our rights slowly getting taken away from us more and more. It's just kind of frustrating because there's like a lot of stuff in America that I would like for us to just like start dealing with. Like, can we get on board with like the 4-day work week now? You know, can we do that? No, because now we have to like worry about whether our like body autonomy is getting taken away from us, so we can't focus on like smaller things, like getting paid more and like union busting and like having a 3-day weekend as like a permanent thing, you know, or just workers' rights in general. I'm afraid that they're going to make their way into the school boards. They're going to make their way into the lower level government and just kind of work their way up from there. I can't imagine that that this is healthy for your mind, to be in this constant state of like vigilance, you know, and looking out, knowing that something's coming and that something's going to get you, and that that the government and the world and Satan is like all out to come and get us right now, you know, and that we need to be careful and we need to like pay attention.
I asked Jane what scares her the most about her mother's QAnon adjacent beliefs.
She's very easily convinced by pretty much anything that she sees as an authority figure and as right. So that can be, I mean, the church is a big one. The church is a huge one. The church is an enormous one. You know, the government that she supports and the government that the church supports. And I mean, my stepdad like controlled her for 20 years, you know, I mean, like her outfit choices, her everything, like where she went and who she went with and all of it. So it's just kind of, I guess that's another reason why it's so frustrating that she's like so willing to just like believe whatever nonsense gets presented in front of her. Because for 20 years that like I watched her just get like manipulated by this person, and like it's just very frustrating when stupid stuff comes in front of her and she's still just kind of like, oh, okay. And it's worrisome, you know, because like, who are you just going to let convince you is like the next right thing that you're supposed to be believing? Or any like conspiracy theory that would just come across her desk, she was like on board with. I'm afraid that she's like limiting her life. She's only in her early 60s. So what is her brain going to be at 72? You know, like, what is it? Are you even going to be there? I really just like worry about her like actually losing her mind, you know, like legitimately like not being there anymore at all, you know, at all.
I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Q Dropped podcast, and many thanks to Jane for sitting down with me and telling me her story. We've posted a special episode alongside this one, so don't miss that. You can find it on any podcast platform or YouTube, and I'll put the link in our show notes. Shout out to our patrons who make this show possible. Be sure to check out the perks at patreon.com/QDropped and help support the show. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, so make sure you're subscribed to be notified. Thanks for listening.